Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, How to Talk to Your IT Team About Getting Access to Data. This webinar is designed for GRC professionals, so welcome. My name is Jillian. I'm the Marketing Program Specialist here at ACL, and I'll serve as your moderator for today. Before I introduce our speakers, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. First, this session will run for 60 minutes, and we'll try to leave about 15 minutes for Q&A at the very end. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to submit them through the Q&A panel on your Zoom webinar console, and we'll address them towards the end of the presentation. If for some reason we don't have time to address your questions in today's live event, please be assured that we will follow up directly after the webinar. Lastly, we're recording today's session, and everyone who registered will get an email with a link to the on-demand version and a copy of today's presentation slides within the next few days. I'd now like to introduce our speakers. First up, we have Keith Cerny. Keith is our Chief Technology Officer here at ACL. In his role, Keith leads the technology teams, including IT, security, and R&D. He has over 18 years experience leading software engineering and IT teams and speaks publicly on the topics of technology and cybersecurity. Welcome, Keith.
It's great to be here. Thanks, Julie.
Next, we have Adam Haberly, a Senior Customer Success Specialist here at ACL. Adam has 5+ years experience helping clients deliver effective audit analytics solutions. Adam has developed an in-depth understanding of ACL technology and is a sought-after expert both internally and externally here at ACL. Welcome to both of our speakers. I'd now like to begin today's presentation, and I'll hand it over to Keith to kick things off.
Thanks, Jillian. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Adam. How are you doing today?
Good, thank you.
All right, so we're going to get right into this. We got a lot of content to get through today, and I'm excited to talk about this. This is a topic that's really near and dear to my heart. You know, getting, to do your job as a GRC professional, you really need to be able to get access to data. You need to do that in a timely manner. And so being able to interact with your IT teams in the most positive manner in order to facilitate that is really critical. And so in our agenda today, we're going to talk about, aligning your data access needs to your strategy. This really helps to make sure that you get the support that you need. We're going to talk about common issues that you might run into. So these are some of the objections that usually come up. And, Adam's been out there on the road helping our customers for years, and he's seen it all. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of those objections that come up. And then I'm going to talk about the role of IT in today's organization. So the role of IT, as most of you know, is changing, and different IT in different organizations are at different levels of maturity, and that can impact this situation as well. And then Adam's going to share some of the great stories from the road. We've got some stories. We'll protect the guilty. We'll talk about some good and some challenges that you've seen out there. And then I'm going to follow up with how to engage with IT. And specifically, I'm going to talk about things that you can do, but also where does ACL technology fit into that? And what are some of the things that we've built into our platform that help you actually make that a lot easier? And then finally, we're going to end on a fun note. We're going to talk about the top 10 ways to make IT your worst enemy. So this would be the anti-list of things to avoid doing. But if you really want to make that relationship go sour, then this will be the list of things that you can do. And we surveyed a number of IT teams to put this list together. And then finally, if we have some time, we'll take Q&As. And if we run out of time on the webinar, we'll make sure if you send in your questions, either Adam or I or anyone from the ACL organization here, we'll follow up with you afterwards. So strategy. I think this is really where it all starts. I think if you are connected to if you can connect your work to the strategy of your organization, that's going to help make things go a lot easier. When you think about things in a risk context, you've got strategic objectives, risks, and process objectives. There's also, if you're looking at things from an opportunity perspective. And so this is kind of we like to show this. This is a normal workflow that we see. And if you can engage with your IT team early and help them understand, the work that you're doing and why it actually matters in your organization, especially if it connects to something that is a core objective. Maybe your organization is moving to the cloud. Maybe you've got a GDPR situation going on. Maybe you have something related to SOX. Those type of things that come up that are company-wide initiatives. They're a great way to be able to capture and show your IT, why exactly you need that to access that data. And so ultimately what you're trying to do is you're trying to take the work that you're doing and you want to connect that to your company's strategy. And then when you engage with IT, really the role of IT is to enable. It's to help enable the business to be successful. And but IT is overwhelmed. They're often stretched thin, and so they want to work on the things that are the most important to the organization. So being able to connect those dots is really, really important to help you be successful. And so here at ACL, we actually have a one-page strategic plan. Maybe you have something like this. Maybe you have a 10K or another document that captures your top priorities. We use this to guide everything that we do here. Now, the sub-items to the priorities change from year to year, but the overall goals, our vision, our mission, and our values, and our top 3 priorities, they rarely change. And so often when we're working here at ACL, we look at ways that we can anchor our work to our one-page strategic plan. It really helps to guide us and make sure that we're all working in alignment across the teams and with our IT team as well. But sometimes you run into some challenges when you're out there, and you're going to hit some roadblocks. And we do business in a lot of countries. We do business with many different kinds of organizations, and we see quite a few different objections out there. So Adam, what are some of the things that you've seen out there when you've been on the road?
Yeah, so I'm just going to start off with kind of a thought around how much experience I have with different client engagements. I think I'm probably around at least the 125 mark with client engagements right now of what I've implemented in the last 8 years, coming up on my 8-year anniversary in September. So as Keith mentioned, I have seen a lot of good. I've seen a lot, or maybe not a lot of bad. I've seen some bad, and I have seen the odd ugly here and there. So from kind of my experience, I compiled a list of just the top 5 common objections from IT. So the first one on the list here is unknown technology with unknown purpose. That's kind of related to IT's involvement in the acquisition of any data analytics platform, whether or not it's ours or a competitor. It's just IT is involved in that conversation way late. So all of a sudden, I'm on a call with a customer. They've already bought the licenses, and now IT's pulled in and said, "Well, we need access to your data." And I say, "I don't. What does ACL stand for? Isn't that something in your body that you can like tear?"
Access control list.
Yeah, exactly. So they Google it, and they may or may not find us. Well, I think they find us in the top 3. I'm not sure on Google, but so they just don't know what we are. And if they're involved in that conversation early, and we're talking, when you're trying to figure out what technology would fit your needs, whether or not it's ACL or a different application, get IT involved early. That's going to make them like you a little bit more, because they feel that they're a valued part of that decision-making process, and they can provide their objections early if they have, not objections, concerns or questions, and ACL can help to answer those questions way early so that it's not a surprise when you get excited that you bought ACL and you can't implement because you got a roadblock.
I think you showed up one time on a client site, and it was at that time that they actually walked you over to IT and said, "Hey, here's our consultant. He needs to have access to these systems." It's probably a little bit late to have that kind of an activity happen, right?
Yeah, it ended up being that the IT individual at the time had no idea who I was and why I was there, and it was Monday morning, and I had done my 9 hours of travel to the East Coast, and all of a sudden I couldn't access any data. So I sat there, still charging, unfortunately. The meter was still running, and unable to perform data analysis because I can't build beautiful data analytics for customers without data. It's
right.
Impossible.
Yeah, absolutely.
So number 2 on the list here, we're talking about query size and impact on system and databases. That's, we don't know, what are you trying to pull? Well, we need to understand the scope of what we're doing first. And if IT knows what the scope is, okay, we're tackling accounts payable. How much accounts payable? And is it going to impact our system, or is it going to crash our system? I think is a later slide on there. But I think Keith has got a good kind of breakdown of the impact of system and what one of the newer versions of ACL Analytics can do, which is through our new connectors, that can help you identify how much data you're going to be pulling in. And I don't want to steal the thunder from Keith's slide later on, but you can help, or you can work with IT to help refine your process so that they approve about how much data you're pulling in at a given time, and they can be there to kind of work you through that process. So you're not pulling 15 years of data and only need a month, but you're querying down that data and refining it to that 1 month that you need. So you're not accidentally pulling, from maybe production and
Exactly. I think a key thing is, making the IT team a partner to that process of deciding, how much data that you're going to pull, where you're going to pull it. Are you going to do some pre-filtering, all of that kind of activity? So for sure, that's a key one.
Exactly, because they know the data. They should know the data better than you.
Right.
They should.
They usually do, but it depends on. There's a lot of different systems out there, so IT isn't always. Sometimes they're really good with the network side of things, but they might not necessarily know the applications or the databases. It just depends. Every IT is different.
Fair comment. So number 3 on the list here is user access. This is who is accessing the data, pretty much from this standpoint. And one of the common roadblocks that happens, and I was just on a call yesterday, I think I mentioned this, is that when you go to implement your software, if you're doing a direct connection to the database, and we're not talking extracts here, you need a set of credentials that can access that database. And then there's questions around, well, what type of access? Does ACL write to the database? Does it update records? No. ACL has been read-only since inception over 30 years ago. We just need read access to that. Okay, well, now they get a little bit more calm because they understand what level of access to the data that you need. One of my IT clients mentioned to me that, well, what would help maybe calm the concerns from a user access standpoint is having IT build a view for you, and having your user access just go right to that view. And so they kind of also help give you the data that you need, but then they feel a little bit more secure because they built what you're accessing from that perspective.
Yeah, and they're doing that in a way that's optimal for them as well. Now, I think one of the other key things here, the data protection control. So even though you're pulling data out in a read-only way, which IT loves that, the challenge is that, that data is being extracted out of systems. And so the question is about, what's the life cycle of that data? Where's it going? How is it being stored? And how is it going to be, how is it going to be secured over the period of time that it's going to be there? So that's another one that often comes up, is just looking at the whole security and life cycle of the data. So having a good conversation with IT about, this data is being used for this purpose and it's going to live for this long. It's just being used to generate an issues report, and then it can be deleted. That goes a long way as well to helping settle and address some of those objections. If you know not just what you're using the data for in the moment, but what you're going to be doing with it over time.
Yeah, of course. And a note on that one as well is when you're talking about security of data and where it's going to live, having one centralized location where that data exists rather than 10 users with 10 copies of the data that have created 10 different reports and they've stored exactly the same data on a shared drive or their personal workstation. There's so much copies of potentially sensitive data that aren't centralized into a specific location. So I think you've got some slides later on talking about how to centralize your data so that it becomes less of a concern after IT has given you access to it, because they may want to know where you're going to put that data and what you're going to do with it afterwards.
Yeah, they absolutely want to know, especially with today's cybersecurity environment. It's just absolutely critical to know where the data is and how it's being secured.
And the last one on the list here is around the multiple stakeholders. So we mentioned a couple of other objections at the top here, and we're talking multiple stakeholders because it's not just the person who owns the data. It's the environment maybe of where the data lives, and then setting up that user access and potentially installing our technology on a server. So talking about setting up a server. Oh, hold on. Do we need to build a server? Do we need to buy that? Or do we need to set up a virtual machine environment? Do we need to have someone log into a terminal server to get onto that server? Like what is the infrastructure? And that's kind of breaking down more of the first bullet point here of unknown technology. So what are the requirements? What teams need to be involved in? And ACL can help to facilitate those requirements from what teams are needed to have a successful implementation.
Yeah, and in our help system, we have guides on installation and the types of environments that we support. And it's always a great idea to get those out to IT early so they have some time to to get educated on exactly what's needed. And we support a variety of cost-effective deployments, but definitely involving IT right from the beginning is the key point. That's probably on this whole slide. Number one objection is probably just involving IT late. Even when you're just thinking about doing something, it's good to have a relationship with IT and get connected with them. So let's talk a little bit about modern IT. What makes, what is happening with IT today? And IT teams are not all created equal. I think sometimes people think, that group off in the dark area of the business, or often they're working on big projects that you may not be aware of. They might be doing ERP migration, and so you don't always necessarily have visibility into IT. But I think, as you look at IT teams today, and depending on your organization, they may be on a different maturity scale. From very early stage where their capabilities are emerging. So this might be a smaller organization, or maybe there's been a lot of turnover in IT. And so they're still working on, a lot of their success depends on how hard they work as individuals. There's not a lot of repeatable processes in place yet. There might not be something a process that you could just reach out and engage over. You might actually have to, guide them and be the leader in terms of leading them to what you need. Whereas all the way on the other side, where you got a very mature level 5 business partner type IT, they'll have established systems and processes that you basically just need to hook into. They might have an annual calendar of when they do system updates. They may have, the best time frames for actually doing installations that you work with. You could really tell the difference between them because they'll have a lot more systems in place. Now, if you don't know how to navigate those systems in a more mature environment, it can feel like a lot of red tape, a lot of bureaucracy. So getting to know IT and getting to know how those work can help you navigate those waters. And if you rarely interact with IT, and then the only time you need to go in is when you're doing a project, or you're doing an audit or a compliance or risk project, and you need access to data, it's probably, again, too late. You're gonna probably run up and just not necessarily know how to work through those challenges. And so knowing your IT, knowing what level they're at, and this is just one view, this is one set of dimensions. There's different dimensions that a modern IT is looking at. And I think the last point I want to make about what's going on with IT today is there's a lot of major systems migrations that are happening. So IT teams are moving on-premise products that they've been using, on-premise systems, into the cloud. And so a lot of IT teams today are very busy. They're probably busier than they've ever been as they work to do those migrations. And they're also trying to figure out exactly, in a cloud world, what is their role? How do they fit in? Are they doing IT governance over the cloud environment? Are they helping with procurement? It depends, again, on the size of the organization, but IT is going through quite a bit of a shift right now. And so I think having some empathy and understanding what IT is doing can go a long way in building a good relationship with them.
A good point in terms of IT being, extremely busy. I was on site a couple of years ago, and they were rolling out a migration to a new system, and they had a countdown clock on all their hallways, and it was T-minus 400 days. Could you imagine not being able to get priority on a project for 400 days because they're focusing on something else? That's, it's going to be very challenging for you.
Yeah, definitely. If there are some moon launch projects going on in the organization, it's best to be aware of those and understand where there's an opportunity to fit in, because usually it's a very small window of time that you can get your needs across. And so, Adam, you were saying that you've been on the road. You were on the road, what, about almost 3 weeks out of every month at different client sites?
Yeah, in terms of a number of trips, I believe I'm the number one in ACL right now. Not in terms of distance, because I don't get to go to our other offices like London and Singapore, but I pretty much service anything in North America. I just got back from a 3-week back-to-back trip, and I was back in the office on Monday. I'm doing a webinar on Tuesday. So I go on the road a lot, and it's my preference to be on site with customers so that I can interact and build that relationship with them and their IT individuals as well. So I've got a couple of stories, 2 good and 1 not so good, that I'm going to be sharing, and kind of maybe what was the outcome and why I think that they were good experiences, and the one that was bad, and what happened at those specific trips. So this one was a hospital. I'm not going to go into any more information than that. So this was at a hospital, and I went on site and I delivered some compliance analytics in our analytics exchange application. There wasn't too many roadblocks in terms of data. There was a lot of questions, and we had to get individuals involved from ACL side as well as their side, just to understand what we were going to do. This, thankfully, the chief compliance officer over there was using one of our competitors and was already connecting to their data, and then he moved off that competitor and went to ACL. So he had already done a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of what he needed from the data. But what stood out for me from an IT perspective is I provided enablement services to the clients there from both an audit and compliance perspective. I had about 12 people in the room, and among them was an IT professional. And he asked me weeks before I arrived on site if he could participate. I said, yeah, sure, that's not a problem. And he says, well, I really want to learn what ACL can do and what the software is capable of so that I can support the organization better. And I thought that was, I have on the slide here that it's not support, he's embracing the software. So he is really going to be that IT champion. And we always advocate in the customer success organization, you need an ACL champion. Well, if you had an IT champion that also knew ACL, what a value add that would be to the business. Because there wouldn't be, an upgrade question comes down the road. Oh, we have, ACL every year they release, a lot of different versions of the software. So, which is great. We got new functionality in there. Who do we talk to? And we know because it's this gentleman who is intentionally learned the software so that he can support the business better. And that stood out for me. And I don't have that very often.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Having an IT champion. I mean, there's a lot of use cases where IT can benefit from ACL technology as well themselves in their own use. And so I think if you build that relationship and have a champion in IT, it can really go a long way. Like you said, we are releasing a lot of updates, a lot of improvements. That's both a positive, but it's also a challenge for IT, right? Keeping the system current. There's always new updates, security updates as an example. It's really important to keep the product current, the versions current for the users. But you really need to have that champion to help make that go smoothly.
All right, and I did a little bit of a sandwich technique here. So this is going to be the not so good one. I was working with an investment company. This was several years ago, and a very large organization, and so they had a very large IT to support that organization, and they had a specific group that was part of audit, but not really. And they were the data analytics function. They were all ACDAs, which is our ACL Certified Data Analyst designation that we have with ACL. So they knew ACL very, very well. And they'd used ACL for probably about 10 years. And so they had access to a lot of systems. However, if they needed access to a new system or a new table, they had a very convoluted ticketing process. And so they'd submit a ticket for, let's just say, Oracle Financials, and then, this table over here. They'd submit a ticket, but if they had one typo in that ticket, they started all over again. And the ticketing process was multi-layer. So it went from submission of ticket, then approval of the ticket, then the approval review of the ticket, and then finally, a couple of months later, it was the implementation of that ticket. But I believe the implementation side of it was they would actually look at what the request was, and then they would assign a resource, and then that resource would then reach out to the person who submitted the ticket. And you see where this is going in terms of like urgency. It's just because it just seemed as though it was such too many hoops you had to jump through just to get access to a table, to a system that you may have already had access to. And there's not a lot of opportunity for one of those data analysis on that team, or data analysts on those teams, to build a relationship with one specific individual, because it's such a huge IT. When you submit a ticket, you don't know who's going to pick it up. It could be Fred one week and it could be Joan the next week. And then you're not just having that good, good banter back and forth and, buddy with the IT folks, because you're not be able to build that relationship. And I believe turnover was an issue with that specific group. So
even if you built that relationship up with Fred, maybe he leaves the organization, you're starting all over again. And it really became problematic for them because for upgrades, they were always 2 to 3 major releases behind. And I arrive on site, I said, oh, you should hear about version 12's dice coefficient function. It's awesome. And they're like, well, we're on version 10 still, and we're going to be on version 11 next week. And I'm like, okay, well, we're on version 13 now, and you're just getting to version 11. Well, why can't you just jump right to well, no, we have to submit a ticket to go from version 11 now to version 13, but they'll probably want to know why we're not on version 12. So yada, 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 months later.
So with that more complicated engagement that I had with the IT, with the multi-ticket process, we knew ahead of time that it was going to be multiple months of planning beforehand. And unfortunately, what happens with those types of situations, if you hire ACL to do your services implementations, we've got typically a contract expiry duration that IT might have to be aware of, especially with customers who have this very convoluted process. And if it works for the organization, it's I guess it works, but I definitely don't feel as though they're helping to enable the business with putting all this bottleneck in place.
And this is really where, when you run into challenges like that, where IT has these difficult systems, it's where shadow IT comes from. This is where people do an end run around IT. They start buying things on their credit card. They start, finding other ways to move forward because the business needs to operate. And that's where I think, modern IT is changing to, there's always going to be a bit of a bureaucracy, but the goal is to have a minimum viable bureaucracy, something that's just enough in order to make sure that things like data security and proper procurement processes are in place. But when it's a case where you just can't get access to a particular table for something that's needed for a project, that's really where it starts to go sideways. And you had a third story as well, Adam.
I do, and this is I'm going to end on a high note here because this is my favorite customer. I was actually on site with them last week. So this is a municipality customer, and
I've been on site with them 3 times. They've been using ACL for probably about 6-7 years. And they've used multiple specialists involved in their group. I think I'm the 5th to work with them. So why this is my favorite customer, from not only a implementation and exciting analytics that they're developing, but also from an IT perspective, is whenever I arrive on site, everybody takes kind of their week off, and we do ACL workshops, so to speak, where everybody in the room is talking about what they want to do with data analysis and remediation process in our GRC product, and IT is in the room. And there's one specific individual that comes in every time, and he is building data analytics with me. And I don't have a lot of IT professionals that he's part of the team. He's part of the, you mentioned it in your maturity level, he's a business partner. So he's in the room really enabling the business by developing analytics for them. And he's so familiar with where all the data is coming from. If he realizes we need access to a table, he just goes in, gives us access to the table, and it's done in a couple of minutes because we already have access to the system, right? If it was a brand new system, I could understand a little bit longer of an approval process, but we already have access to the system. We're already accessing more sensitive information than maybe this lookup code table over here that we just don't have access to. So we're talking almost real-time support from IT. Wouldn't that be great that send an email in or have a ticket and it's answered right away? Not that automated email that comes back, we've received your ticket, but actually a solution be given to you. So I had a little bit of an interview with him, and I asked him, why are you even in the room? Paraphrasing a little bit, I said it a bit nicer. He says, well, I can't really enable the business if I don't know the tool inside and out. And the fact that ACL is so powerful, being data agnostic, we can connect this to whatever we want. And I'm seeing the value from an IT perspective. So I want to learn all the bells and whistles with the tool. So not only I can support the business, but I might be able to bring this into my own group and make my job easier. Like, wow, I'm saying that on my webinar next week. So that he does feel as he's part of the team, and he is a partner with the business to really work with them from a data perspective.
I think what I really like about that is, you think about it from his perspective. He's kind of looking at it, enabling the business, but he's also looking at it a bit selfishly, and that's totally fine, right? How can it help? How can it help and benefit him? Which I think is great. I think if you can find out what are those motivators that the IT team members have, what do they care about, and then you can align those with what you're doing as well, then it's a great, you find the perfect mix. And so, that leads well into this next section, which is really where I want to talk about how to engage with IT. And I think we've kind of this is going to be more like a review section now, because we've been talking about a lot of these things as we've gone along. But I also want to talk about ACL technology and some of the specific things about ACL that can make this go smoother and make this an easier process. And so, we talk about there's 5 items here, which I think are really kind of key. Building a positive relationship with IT, going beyond today's project work. So I think, don't wait until you have a project or you have a need. Build that relationship early. Now, easy, of course, with a smaller IT organization. With a very large one, like you were talking about, that financial services, Adam, that's not so easy. But still, you could find the leaders in the organization and build that relationship. And I think that this is a key one as well. Be an advocate for IT in your organization. Sometimes IT is, unfortunately, the butt of a joke sometimes, or pointed out as being a challenge to work with. And I think don't fall into that trap. Be a person who actually understands the challenges that IT has, and look for ways that you can actually advocate for them and support them in the business. And then again, we're beating a dead horse here a bit, but engage IT early. Share your goals and objectives. If they have a contextual understanding of what you're trying to achieve, they're going to be much more capable to support you. And then, treat them as a partner. Even if they're lower on that maturity scale, treat them like they were higher up. They're going to get there at some point. And in fact, if the business engages them and expects them to behave like a partner, well, the funny thing is that they start to behave that way if you work with them. And so sometimes you have to just engage them as though they were a level 5 or a high level mature IT organization. And then finally, use your opportunity, and we can definitely help with this as well, to educate them on how ACL is built to work with IT and to really, make that a positive experience. And so I'll give you a couple examples of some of the things that ACL has built into it that can really help make it a smoother conversation and give a lot of visibility to what we can do. And so one of the first things, of course, is we have a lot of native data connectors. So these are built-in connectors that have been tested against these different systems. We've always at ACL had, over our entire life cycle, a huge focus on making it easy to access data from disparate systems. And so this is a part of every release that we do, where we add more connectors. And we're always looking to improve and make it easy to get access data from on-premise systems, cloud systems. It doesn't really matter to us. Whatever is being used out there, we're going to find a way to connect to it. And in our latest release, we actually added a couple of really key ones that I think are worth pointing out. So MySQL, Twitter, which is great for social. If you're doing reputational analysis, Twitter is great to have access to. Active Directory, this of course is big. If you want to do some analytics around, when employees leave the business and you want to know that they've been removed from systems, the ability to link and access what's going on in Active Directory is huge. And then of course, this is the big one that a lot of our customers have been asking us for ages, is the ability to get data from email systems. So be able to connect into the email system, pull data out, do text analysis, look for, maybe there's a couple of people in, talking about in code words that are thinking about doing something that's not right. There's ways that you can analyze the email looking for those type of things. And so that's key. And then built into ACL analytics as well, we have in our latest releases as well, we have the new data access window. And so this is a fantastic capability to be able to connect to the systems using those data connectors, but then also do some pre-filtering, do some analysis even before you've pulled the data out, and be able to really get just the data that you need, And this can be great as well because it can help, you could work with IT to partner with them to make sure that you're not pulling massive amounts of data out. If you don't need massive amounts of data, you may just need a little bit. And there's a really great point here, capability here as well, which is SQL mode. Maybe Adam, you can talk a little bit about how you've worked with IT where you show them the actual queries that this pulls up.
Yeah, so I'm going to start by saying
If you're on any version that's below version 12, which is when the connectors were released, this sole feature right here should be why you upgrade. The window, you're going to have multiple joins in a connection now, where in older versions that was quite challenging to do. Multiple joins, it's almost drag and drop functionality. And once you have everything built from a pretty GUI or a graphical user interface setting, you can hit the SQL mode button at the top, which I think is labeled 8 here, and it shows the native SQL syntax that maybe you can bring your DBA into the fold, or take that syntax and send them an email and say, this is what I'm grabbing. Is this the most efficient way of querying this data? And they may give you a modified version, and you just take what they email back with you, you put it into SQL mode, and it builds your query out. Having the ability of previewing how many records that you're going to pull down, ooh, that's fantastic, because if I'm not familiar with this data, with the data set that I'm pulling from, and there's one nasty table, I think, in SAP that is the change master table, which is huge. And if you got 20 years of data in there and you just try to grab 1 year, it could be millions of records and you had no idea. And if you didn't have that preview functionality of how many records you're going to pull in before, now use it all the time. So you know that it's going to be a smaller query, a refined query, and you can use IT to help with that.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely key. I mean, being able to take and see the query that's being generated, share that with IT, and for them to be able to look at that and say, okay, that looks good, or based on their experience, maybe they want to tailor it a little bit, maybe they want to help improve it to make it more efficient. That's massive. And then once you've got it right, you of course, using ACL script, you can script that so that the next time you need to do it, you don't need to go back through all those settings. You don't need to do all that work. You've got it scripted and ready to go for the next time you're doing an analysis. And then that really leads well, I think, into ACL Analytics Exchange. I mean, this is really where IT gets excited, because now when they're working with ACL, a lot of those things that we talked about earlier that are challenges are addressed with AX. I was talking earlier about data security as an example. So the ability to have that data in a central location on the Analytics Exchange server, that's a huge thing for IT. They can make sure that there's all the security capabilities in place. They can control who has access to that data. And so you could still do your analysis. You're not limited in what analysis you're doing, but you don't have data propagating to all different people's desktops and laptops. And so that gives IT a lot of comfort over the control of things. It's also great for the ability to schedule. How often do you see, Adam, people using the scheduling with AX?
Quite often. If the process is something that they want to have running continuously, of course. What is a good addition to that is the Analytics Exchange web client, which I had a customer who had used ACL for 8 years, didn't even know it existed. And it's called, we refer to it as the consumer. So it's the end user. If you had a process that was scheduled, the end user would log into a very nice and aesthetically pleasing interface, and they would grab the end result or visualize it directly in the web client application. And they didn't even have to build an analytic themselves. They just had someone schedule it for them. They logged into the tool, grabbed the report they need, and then they ran away, did whatever they need to, or went into results and remediated it there.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that's really great about scheduling is, you can work with IT to determine when's the best time to actually do that. That schedule. It could be middle of the night when the system has nobody on it. So if you're doing a massive extract, like you talked about, pulling data from some tables can be quite a bit of take quite a bit of time. You're not going to want to do that when everyone's on the system or when IT is running perhaps a maintenance on the system. And so working with IT to figure out what the right window for scheduling that extract can be to just show that you care about IT's world and you're not trying to make their life miserable by addressing something like that. And yeah, I think AX gives you a lot of ability around performance of the system as well too. So if you need, if you want to offload some of the processing, you don't want to be doing it on your local computer. It's a great way to centralize that as well, to make it a much more performant system, which doesn't have a lot to do with perhaps an IT concern, but maybe if IT is trying to make sure that you're successful, they want to make sure that you can get your work done. Having that ability to have that central processing can go a long way to just making things happen fast.
Yeah, and just a comment on that in terms of the speed. I've had probably a dozen customers, and I was surprised at how reasonably common it was that at the end of the day, they would kick off their analytics from their local machine, and they're like, this is going to take 14 hours. And if anything happened during the night, they'd have to wait until the end of their business day again to run it off, or to run that process again, just because it took so much time to run, and it bogged down their system in terms of the execution time to do that. And if it's an analytics exchange and there's an error that happens, it's not the end of the world, because you can just schedule it to run at any time and apply that fix if there was anything wrong with the process.
Yeah, absolutely. I think AX really takes it to the next level when it comes to engaging with IT on all these different items. All right, so with that, we're going to get into our top 10 ways to anger IT. So we've talked about some of the objections. We've talked about connecting the work you're doing to strategy. We've talked about our technology and some of the things that it helps facilitate with IT. Now, if you just want to go the other way now, Adam, and just wreck it all, what would be the way to, what would be Adam's top 10 ways to anger IT?
I like how I'm being labeled as this is my top 10 ways here.
All right, so let's go with number 10.
Yeah. Oh, we're going backwards all the way up. All right, so Keith mentioned this one earlier. We're talking about shadowing IT. So the process is a process that you don't like going through. It's too many tickets or whatnot related to that investment in organization, and you just go around IT. And I've seen quite a bit of this from a purchasing card perspective, where, oh, why is that merchant category code going to Best Buy to get a monitor? Should that not have gone through IT to procure that for you? And they like, yes, it should have, but that is a great example of shadowing IT. If it was a long process you didn't want to go through, or you knew that there was a sale at Best Buy,
right?
Don't go around your IT. They're gonna find out one way or another.
Exactly. All right, number 9. Oh yeah, use accidental coffee spills to get new equipment.
Yes.
Yeah, this is your computer is getting a little bit old, and you just whoops across the keyboard with some coffee, and you walk up to IT and be like, yeah, look, I need a new computer. They don't tend to like that surprise. So
well, we can do some data analytics around that about how often you had to replace your laptop, and if you're number 1 on the list.
Exactly. Number 8, share passwords with colleagues, friends, and family.
Oh yeah. Good old Post-it note on your laptop or whatnot, where it's a secure password, and if it's something that's not just your personal password, but it's a network password or a password into let's say Box, a cloud repository for all your company's files, that is, that's a little bit high risk there.
Yeah, absolutely. Companies and organizations are rolling out, hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars worth of like these sophisticated cybersecurity tools. And all of them are defeated if you leave the door open to the house, right? So that's definitely one to frustrate IT. Number 7, continually ask for help before you've even tried to solve a problem yourself.
I think you gave a good analogy yesterday with this one, when Keith, where we're talking about a healthy bank account. There's hopefully that's the one we're talking about here, but it's kind of the give and take. If IT gives you direction of how to solve the problem last week, and then you have the same problem again, if you don't try to solve it yourself, you don't try to help them out, right? Reduce their workload. Effectively, you have a debit and a credit of a bank account. If you keep taking from IT, you're going to be in the negative, right? You need to give back. You need to help out IT sometimes. If something common that's a problem, don't submit that ticket where you forgot your password and need to reset, and they've got a document on a shared drive for you to look at how to reset your password, but you're submitting a ticket for that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and if they ask you to do something, like if they're rolling out some updates or some patches, be the first one. Be the first one to put those on your system. Be the first one to take the IT training or security training, and you know what? You'll get on the good list rather than the other list.
Yeah.
So number 6, I talked about this earlier, publicly making fun of IT. Yeah, just don't. Just don't engage in that behavior. IT are full of wonderful people, hardworking, and challenged with a lot of what's going on today as companies really invest heavily in becoming digital businesses. So yeah, don't make fun of IT. Number 5. Okay, this is a key one for you, Adam.
This was the unknown application for an unknown purpose that I had as an objection earlier on. If you bought ACL and you just walked up with a signed contract or work order and whatnot, and you just said, well, we bought the software, install it. What is going to be their response to that? So make sure they're involved early on.
Yeah, this kind of goes with number 8 as well, storing confidential data in public places. This is just don't take the data that is your customer or your client information or your information, your employee information, and put it in a place that anyone on the internet can access.
Well, especially with that one, just quickly on that is if you build a relationship to get access to the data and they give you access to the data and you take that data and then you put it into a public space, whether or not it's on purpose or accidental, good luck getting access to your next set of data.
Yeah, you're getting on that other list.
Yeah.
This is always a bad idea, is to complain to their boss's boss.
Yep.
You don't want to go in and just, if you're seeing an issue, just take it to them directly and work with them. So don't complain to their boss's boss. That's definitely, and look, I even have the slides going the wrong. So number 1, number 2, complain to their boss. And of course, don't crash the system.
Yeah. And that's just familiarizing yourself with the data and refining your queries with their assistance if you need that assistance.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, with that, we've got to our top 10. So I think we have about 10 minutes for questions. So if there's any questions out there, feel free to send them our way. Yeah, so one question was asking about if there's a concern about data integrity. So filtering down the data before. If filtering down the data, Adam, in the system is not an option, what are some of the techniques that you've seen to help make that go smoother, help it go faster?
Filtering the data like before we pull it into the application?
Yeah, so how we were showing earlier the way that you can actually, using the data access system, you can actually do pre-filtering. So what if you're not able to do that?
If you're pre-filtering, you're pulling in everything from the start of time, meaning the start of your system being up, and then you're applying ACL filters within our analytics or analytics exchange applications to refine it further. So effectively, you're pulling in, let's say, 15 years, and then you're throwing out 14 years and only keeping 1. So your time that you're reading from the system is going to be a lot longer than if you just were able to pull 1 year at a time to what your scope of that data analysis is going to be. So if you can't do it on the initial import process into ACL, then you can do it within ACL. It is going to be slower, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. We've got another question here about this person is saying they're not allowed to use a data connector from ACL that's actually on their desktop to connect to data. So they've got ODBC disabled, as an example. What's the best way for them to convince IT to allow them to do so?
Well, their current options would then be getting an extract from somewhere if you can't have direct connection, or maybe a little bit of an old school way of doing things is through database profile, which is not really used anymore, but you'd be getting an extract or a report that you'd have to go into the system. So effectively, you're never going to be able to properly have continuous auditing and continuous monitoring in place if there's always a reliance to pull down a report from somewhere, because it's not continuous. You can't schedule that. There's always a reliance on someone generating that data for you. So effectively, your IT is putting a blocker on helping you enable continuous monitoring in your organization.
Yeah, that's a great point. And actually, we've got a great comment here from Don, who's saying the first step before going on site is to ask for the organization's general control statement on data access. And so, you know, the use, the transportation, the storage of data, if they have that in place, you can leverage that to have a really good understanding of what's allowed, what's not allowed, what the right process is. And if they don't have that document or that formal documented process in place, you should recommend one be actually developed, because that can help guide the organization when it comes to their choices around the process for getting access to data. I think that's a really good comment.
Great suggestion.
Adam, when it comes to getting access from data from SAP systems, what are some of the things that we have here at ACL that can help make that go smoothly?
Well, we've got two options, one that I like and one that I don't like as much. Start with the one I don't like as much, which is an extract. And SAP has canned reports or custom views that somebody has built for you. In my experience, when you deal with an extract, we can't have continuous auditing, continuous monitoring, as I mentioned on a previous question or comment. But it also means that you don't have an understanding of the underlying data, because a lot of the times from SAP, you have a canned report or you have somebody who built a view, they've changed the underlying naming of SAP. So if I look at you, Keith, and I say Lifner, Lifnr, you may or may not know what that is, but you may know what a vendor number is, for example. Well, that's what the Lifner is in SAP. So the user would only receive the information of what's been sugar-coated for them in an extract, but you don't understand the base data elements. The second option, which is the preferred option, is leveraging ACL's SAP certified product called Direct Link. And that can be used to schedule or to import data into your application and schedule that process as well. And you have a different user interface and interaction where you can do SAP server-side joins prior to pulling that data in, so it's a little bit more refined, and you control what the data is. So you may not know what's coming from that extract. Somebody built that for you. John's no longer here anymore. He built that for you, but nobody really knows what the underlying report does, but everybody uses it. If you build the query yourself from ACL's Direct Link, you know intimately what the scope of that query is going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of organizations are moving to cloud systems as well. So when they need to get access to the data in those systems. And so what are you seeing out there, Adam, in terms of connecting to cloud systems to pull down data? Not seeing that much right now from your travels?
Not as much as I'd like to see it with all of our nice new connectors. Seems to be anything that's third-party hosted, which is normally what you would talk about cloud solutions. So I have seen, it's very interesting that HR is usually the first to be cloud, and yet they're the ones that usually put blockers on some of their data. But anyway, so if it's an HR system like Workday or something like that, where you're grabbing that information, they usually just generate a report, an extract for the time being. It may just be unfamiliar with the fact that ACL can connect to their data, not from a Workday perspective, but for other systems that we do have a native connector for.
Yeah, and we have a native connector for Concur as well. We certainly see a lot of demand around, connecting to tools like that for being able to pull down expense data for different types of analysis as well. So we're in the product side of the organization. We're seeing more and more the leading edge of demand around cloud connectors. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, we're going to continue to add more and more connectors as we go forward with the product, as we improve it. So I think that's it for questions. So we'll wrap it up here. We'll give everybody a little bit of time back as transition to the end of the hour. Just want to say thank you to you, Adam, for your time today, and to everyone for joining us for today's webinar. It's always fun to talk about the challenges around IT, and especially when you have some IT challenges yourself as you're given the webinar. Yep. You got to roll with it. And just wanted to say we appreciate everybody's time and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.